Why knowledge matters.
I'll preface my answer to just the observation that I had essentially two broad tracks in my career. And I'm not sure why the balloons came. I think when I move my hands, it does that. In the first 25 years of my career were working in public education as a teacher, then a resource teacher for gifted programs. I was asked to develop and direct a summer governor's school type enrichment program, a residential program for gifted students in the summers. Uh, then I became a program coordinator for gifted programs in a large school district. Then I made a shift and went to a state ed agency in Maryland, not to be an educational bureaucrat, but to work on a very interesting program, innovative program. I was then brought into the early days of the standards based movement in the US through Maryland, where we developed not only state standards for subject areas, but created a somewhat revolutionary state assessment program, all built around performance based assessments, where kids are actually applying their learning as opposed to multiple choice test items. I then went on to direct the Maryland Assessment Consortium, which was helping teachers learn to develop rich, authentic tasks and use them not for grading or evaluation as much as for feedback for students. So I did all of those things over the course of 25 years, working for other people, but in interesting and somewhat innovative roles. Then one of my first major books, the book Understanding by Design, was published. And that, surprising to myself and Grant Wiggins, my co author, it really took off. So now I'm at a life crossroads where I was getting requests for speaking at conferences, running workshops, being interviewed, but I had a full time job and I couldn't do both. But I had fortuitously 25 years in a state education retirement system, which gave me the option to take an early retirement. And I made the choice to do that and pursue writing and consulting. So that's the second half of my career, now 28 years. Now, to your question, here is my day currently. I get up at 6:30 or 7. I do a short yoga routine because I'm old and stiff, so you got to keep the muscles moving. And then my days vary, but a general profile of the week would include 2 or 3 webinars, maybe 2 hours each, on various topics, including on teaching for deeper learning. And I do that for schools, districts, including international schools. Um, some writing. Most of my current writing is short form, articles and blog posts. Um, and then preparation of materials for, I have a couple of upcoming in-person conferences, so I work on preparing materials for those. I usually have conversations with a few colleagues on various matters of teaching, learning, and consulting. But then at a personal level, I try to do some exercise every day. Um, I've gotten into pickleball, which is an interesting kind of hobby sport. And for me, learning a new sport at an advanced age is itself a challenge and interesting. There's a social dimension to pickleball, which I've really enjoyed, especially coming off the pandemic where people are isolated. And often people my age tend to be isolated if they're not working or they have, reduced family members, people have passed. So I do that. I also go to a gym and lift weights. Um, so my day is a balance of professional things, personal things, exercise, social through pickleball. And finally, every day I meditate, and I meditate twice a day. The meditation is not spiritual or religious as much as it is a technique to just slow down the mental chatter and get quiet. And I will say, since you asked me, meditation that I've been doing now for 45 years has been one of the most impactful things in my life. A, for reducing stress and just calming down and reducing the mental chatter. But I will say it has brought a mental clarity that has significantly contributed to my professional life. As I mentioned, I was not a great writer early on, but I've come to appreciate that writing is essentially thinking made manifest. So if you work on your thinking, your communication, including writing, will be enhanced. And I can't tell you how many times in the middle of or mostly coming out of a meditation, I'll have these thoughts that will just spark. And typically they reflect something I've been thinking about or working on, but hadn't quite resolved. And I happen to believe that the clarity that comes from quieting the mind allows those thought bubbles to emerge unblocked by all the static. So that was a long answer, but since you asked, I'm giving you a full treatment of my day. Oh, by the way, my wife and I enjoy meals together and usually watch some kind of something on TV for a short time also.
Thank you so much, because this is what really is life all about, right? And having a routine that you just described is truly an inspiration for our viewers and listeners, because we can learn like from someone, because you have been through 74 years. And why should we not learn from someone as wise as you are? And thank you so much for sharing. But now let's dive into your beautiful book, Teaching for Deeper Learning, Tools to Engage Students in Meaning Making. Wonderful book. I truly recommend to everyone, especially in education, to accelerate, his teaching and the striving of their students. Beautiful book. Thank you so much. So let's start with what made you write the book in the first place.
Well, the short answer is it ties into my life philosophy that you asked me in my first question, trying to make learning engaging, purposeful, and thoughtful for both teachers and students. The larger answer is that this is part of a really a career's quest. One of the first major books I wrote was with Dr. Grant Wiggins, a series of books called Understanding by Design. Understanding by Design is basically a curriculum and assessment planning framework, and it's being used by thousands of teachers around the world, literally around the world. It was the book that launched my writing and consulting career beyond my um, other jobs that I mentioned. So, Understanding by Design has, we propose that the focus of Understanding by Design, of a modern education, in fact, should be to develop and deepen students' understanding of important ideas and processes, ultimately, so they can transfer their learning. I think a modern education should do more than present lots of information and hope students can remember it and use rote learning as the main delivery. A modern education, given the nature of the world, the fact that new opportunities and challenges emerge, the world is unpredictable, as COVID pandemic and the AI phenomena has shown us. And so a modern education should prepare students to be able to navigate new things, even unpredictable things. But you can't transfer something if you don't understand it, right? If all you have is rote learning, all a student can do is give back what was told to them in the way it was told. So the Understanding by Design framework is focusing curriculum and our assessments on teaching and assessing for understanding, building off, of course, basic skills and foundational knowledge, which are the core. But I like to see basic skills and foundational knowledge should be thought of as the floor, not the ceiling of a modern education. We want to build toward understanding and transfer. In our book, and our series of books, by the way, Grant Wiggins and I focused largely on two of three questions. One, what's most worth learning for understanding? What are the big ideas that we want to develop and teach for understanding and transfer within disciplines, and some that cut across disciplines, like critical thinking, with the ability to work well with others in teams? And then the second stage of our quote backward design process is assessment. Here are some questions that we want people to think about. Are we assessing everything that we value the most in education, or mostly the things that are easiest to test and grade or measure? how will we know students really understand and can apply their learning as opposed to remember stuff? How do we make our assessments more like what students will encounter in the real world? The whole idea of authentic or relevant assessment tasks is in that mix. So, largely, our books on understanding by design focused on the nature of the curriculum and what's most worth understanding and how we know that kids understand. But the third stage in what we call backward design is how we teach toward those ends. So Grant Wiggins and I put less emphasis in the third question about how we teach because we felt there was a great need in education to help people think more carefully about the content they teach and the way they assess learning. Grant Wiggins and I in 2015 were planning our next book, which was going to be on teaching for understanding and transfer, which was getting into that third question. And I was literally had scheduled a trip to his home, which was in Connecticut, where we had each outlined ideas for the book. And then we were going to meet for the weekend and flesh out our outline and start writing. Grant suffered a heart attack the week before our meeting and passed away. It was shocking. It was unexpected. And it put an end to our planned book and to a 25-year friendship and colleagueship. I always wanted to write that book because it would complete the sort of the three-part elements of understanding by design. But without Grant, I didn't feel like I could do that. Fortunately, however, I connected with a longtime friend and colleague, Dr. Harvey Silver. And Harvey is literally the most brilliant teacher and developer of instructional materials and tools that I've ever met. And we knew each other for many years, and we've already talked about, hey, we should work together somehow. Well, it was that question that got us united. And I realized that Harvey was just the perfect partner to do what Grant Wiggins and I had envisioned, which is to write a book focusing particularly on teaching that would honor the ideas of understanding by design, but even if a teacher didn't know understanding by design, could benefit. So again, a very long answer, but it's the history of how the book Teaching for Deeper Learning emerged. I am so thankful for the opportunity to work with Harvey, and we're proud of our book. Now I can say more about the particulars, but that's how that came to be.
Well, that's a heartwarming story, obviously, and also the passing of your long-term friend. That's obviously very, very hard and must have been a big shock, of course. But that you ultimately find Harvey F. Silver, as your partner, and ultimately were able to put it up and publish it. Uh, Huge. So tell us a little bit the biggest challenges that you both encountered when it comes to collaboration, because teaching also it's a form of collaboration. And how did you manage it that it was effective, and that you could ultimately say that yes, you really truly found a partner that you wanted to write the book.
That's a great question. Just briefly, historically, most of my writing has been co-authorship with another person. And I have found that personally, at least, quite valuable because essentially you're conversing with another person, you're hearing their thoughts, you're giving your own, you're sharpening your thoughts through a collaborative process. You're learning with each other, in other words. So I value that. My partnership with Grant Wiggins, in which we wrote 11 books, uh, featured a unique and important collaborative style where we both often had strong ideas, but both of us were willing to put our egos on the side and fight for the best ideas and the best clarity of those ideas. And that is hugely important. I have occasionally worked with authors who their approach is my way or the highway. They don't want to collaborate. They think their ideas are perfect. They don't take feedback. And I just can't work with someone like that. Grant Wiggins, who was one of the smartest people I've ever met, Harvard PhD, and just a brilliant guy, could very easily, not always happily, but would put his ego on the side when I challenged some of his ideas or his writing, and vice versa. We got to a place where we had enormous professional respect for each other, and we both agreed, even implicitly, that the most important thing was the ideas that emerged, not whose ideas they were or who got to turn the phrase a particular way. When I started working with Harvey, we had the same relationship. He has very good and specific ideas, as do I, but we were able to push each other and argue sometimes for the larger good, which is clarity of ideas for the reader. We're serving the reader and we're serving the larger course of the ideas of the book. So challenges occur, of course, when you're co-writing, but you get your best ideas out there, and then you give them to an editor, and the editor has another role to play. He or she will come in and say, you repeated yourself here, or I didn't quite follow you there. So both of us would take that feedback also. Now, I'm going to pause, but I'll mention that there are other challenges or obstacles that both Harvey and I have seen that would impact teachers' ability to follow what we've outlined in our book. So if you're interested, I could go there, but I don't want to belabor the answer.
That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.d-ykm.com.